Welcome, busy gamers. Today we're going to be talking about Ravenswatch. Now, since it was only recently released into early access, we're going to be treating this one a bit differently by calling out specific elements of the game before discussing the good and the bad within it versus the normal good, bad, efficient format. So let's start with a quick overview of Ravenswatch. It was developed by Passtech Games, and it is a top-down action roguelite or roguelike game with a strong theme. In the game, you take control of fallen heroes or legends, fairy tales, and fables such as the Pied Piper, Aladin, and Beowolf before taking the fight to the nightmares that are invading the land with darkness and corruption. In a format that will eventually play out across multiple storybook chapters, you frantically earn experience, complete events, and mine currency for the Sandman to develop out your build and skills. Then there will be a major nightmare that awakens at the end. You have just 4 days that rotate in a unique day and night cycle, allowing for the way your characters feel to adjust, sometimes drastically as you move towards the end at 20 or 25 minutes. Ravenswatch also boasts a unique multiplayer experience for the genre, where experience and resurrections are shared. At the time of this video, I've played the early access for Ravenswatch for about 16 hours now. I've unlocked all 6 of the currently available characters, and I have progressed through 6 levels of nightmare difficulty. I've got my favorites, but I've played each of them in multiple runs. First and foremost, I really enjoyed my time with Ravenswatch, and while I have several complaints, I believe the majority of them are easy fixes and or things that will drop off as they move on through their early access period. The core game and the uniqueness overall is something that's more than worth following its development and update cycle. Especially if you are a fan of the genre, there is already a lot to love. So let's talk about the characters. The promise of unique and thematic takes on old storybook characters was always one of the main draws for me, and Ravenswatch delivers on that promise wholeheartedly. They have a diverse roster of 6 characters, and there are plenty of playstyles to get your head around. My personal favorite did end up actually being Scarlet, as I really enjoyed her balance between a stealthy yet fragile burst damage dealer while in her human form, and a pretty in-your-face werewolf that could take hits while healing back up in her bad wolf or her knight form. Overall, the characters each have their scenarios in which they shine, but the early balance does feel a bit off for me. Some characters seem much better in group versus solo play, or feel weaker and more reliant on specific upgrade paths. For example, I thought the Ice Queen was a particularly egregious example of this. They could either steamroll enemies from the beginning with a specific upgrade, or feel very lackluster depending on what starting skill they got. And the Pied Piper also honestly just kind of felt weak overall, with a low starting damage that was even further reduced at night, and a less than stellar range without upgrades. Now moving on to combat. The core combat in Ravenswatch actually feels quite good. The skills overall are quick and responsive, and while the game only includes a single chapter as of this video, the enemy types are actually numerous and diverse, and boast their own patterns and skills you're going to be needing to adapt to take them down as efficiently as possible. I found a few issues centering around getting locked into animations though. It was especially critical with certain types of skills and upgrades that would result in you being forced to complete a longer animation or a skill with no ability to cancel it, and in the middle of large fights, this can really easily get you killed. The best example I can think of here is Beowolf's power attack. Once upgraded, this is going to be sending out multiple rifts each time you trigger the skill. Each of these rifts have a decent amount of time, but Beowolf himself can only rotate, can't actually move during this period, and can still take damage. This is true to a lesser extent with Scarlet as well once you get the upgrade to perform 5 rapid strikes after a power attack. Both of these things made for some really feel-bad moments in which I would just get locked into the middle of an animation and unable to dodge even though I was prepared to do so. I will say I also often just felt a bit weak or underpowered in the game, especially in the early stages. While this is largely just an impression that I had early on, there is definitely a huge difference between a good versus a bad or even mediocre build from my perspective. And if you have low overall damage versus a large pool of mob health, you can often end up in fights in which it's going to feel like you're almost tickling your enemy. However, if they connect with you, it will take almost a third of your health in many situations. Because of this, I think I'd really rather see larger packs of enemies or groups of mobs that have less health to really make you feel like the hero in more scenarios without drastically altering the difficulty or core gameplay loop. This feeling is often exacerbated by the impression that right now it's usually your best move to move past enemies completely and to gather crystals, find chests and wells, or take part in events. These things should absolutely be important, but the game is built around combat, and I think the incentive is off, especially when you hit level 5. This means your character can no longer level or improve. Overall, I think it would be nice if some currency was granted from killing enemies to balance out this playstyle, or something was added after level 5 that you could still improve your character with. Now, let's move on and talk about the art style. The art style is also definitely worth calling out here. The world is dark and dreary, but it has a lot of character and an almost hand-drawn aesthetic that feels reminiscent to me of something you might see in Don't Starve, but with quite a bit more clarity and definition. I remember being excited to first come across some of the glowing red candles that surround the grimoire challenges, and my only real complaint about the art style is that its take on darkness and the ever-present mist or smoke that travels the map often really felt like it just went too far in its current form. The daytime in the game often looks like what many games would at night, and I legitimately struggled and strained my eyes in some cases. And while you can and will adjust if you play long enough with the game, you really shouldn't have to. So I've got a few things I'd like to touch on that are somewhat smaller comments. The map, the layout is stagnant, but overall events, nodes, and enemy spawns are random, so it does keep you from finding and playing a single path. It's sufficient for now, but I would like to see more overall variation, either in the overall layout or by increasing the variety of nodes and events. I also felt like events themselves felt pretty lackluster, and often there's something I avoided versus being a fun thing to come across and try to complete. Now, I called out things earlier as being something you want to fight around. There are specific events that I'm talking about here. The balance between time invested and difficulty for many of these just wasn't there for me. So, first one is the corrupted node, which would reduce the final nightmare's health by 20%. This node just felt like it took too long and denied you more important progressions by locking you into the fight. I often felt like I could take 20% of the nightmare's health faster in the fight itself and with less overall damage taken to me or risk taken to me than if I took the node earlier on in the game. Grimoires themselves were also pretty risky for me. Their rewards are decent, but getting nothing for failure often meant the risk wasn't really worth the reward for me. The Wishing Well, as my mind, ends up being one of the best events or locations, points of interest on the map is maybe the better way to say it. And it's not really fun from a gameplay standpoint. It's just exchanging your crystals for rare and epic items at random. Then again, the actual event, the quests that you can trigger, which were typically a Three Little Pigs style event where you would help them build their house and then defend them, took an exorbitant amount of time and never were worth it for me. I think I completed them once, maybe twice in the 16 hours, and I tried quite a bit to do it, but it always had a negative impact on my game experience. Let's move on to clarity. Clarity and new player experience for me in this game are poor, and this is the area I hope they get to right away because they have a great game overall. They're going to lose people due to frustration, though, because the game itself teaches you absolutely nothing while playing, instead opting to provide a how-to book that you can read before or between runs. The main issue here is not that reading is difficult, though some people are not going to want to do that, The book itself is often just unclear. It has pages for things like points of interest, which show clear symbols and naming conventions, but it doesn't explain what any of these points of interest actually are or how you interact with them and how they function. That's really it for the miscellaneous section. I will give a mild nod to the multiplayer. That is something that is very unique to this game for me, at least from an ARPG standpoint or from a roguelike top-down action RPG standpoint. It's rare that I'm able to join in with my friends in a roguelike experience and actually play cleanly and concisely, and I feel like this game did it very well. Each of you still has to play a unique hero, so you don't have metas that are basically all Scarlet or metas that are also whatever the most powerful character is. Now, there are characters that do feel like they get pigeonholed here, and because of some of the build structure I talked about earlier, my experience in multiplayer outside of playing with friends was somewhat poor, as you would have a lot of people quit when they did not get the initial upgrade that they were looking for. Other than that, though, I think that's where we're going to stop the video for today. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you've made it to the end, you are a wonderful person, and I really appreciate it. If you love this kind of content or you like this kind of content, please give me comments and feedback so that I can continue to improve. Other than that, have a great time gaming, and I'll see you in the next video.